Once there was a mighty warrior, a man who had won many battles and eventually rose to become a powerful king. But in a strange twist of fate, he was reborn into a new life, this time as a helpless baby. Even though he had started over, he still remembered everything from his past life. Now trapped in a small, weak body, he felt like a prisoner. The world around him was filled with powers he had never seen before, strange, mysterious abilities that fascinated him deeply. He knew he had to grow stronger quickly. In his memories, there was blood dripping from a sword while flames lit up a red sky. He remembered the moment he stood over a woman he had just killed, her lifeless body lying at his feet. That same man had once claimed the throne and crushed his enemies with ease. In another battle, he drove his sword through an opponent, declaring victory with confidence. Then warplanes filled the sky and dropped bombs across a city, causing endless explosions and terrified screams. The king stood watching, his cape blowing in the heat of the destruction. He believed he had become the most powerful ruler of all. Or perhaps he only used to be. In the present, he placed his hand on the glass of a display case that held his old crown. Deep inside, he mourned what he had lost. Suddenly, he was pulled into his own mind, like sinking into a deep ocean. As he drifted downward, he heard the voice of a child softly say, "Please." A beautiful green field appeared before him, and a single feather floated through the air. The child's voice spoke again, "In your new life, seek the light." And so the king was reborn as a baby. A man with a kind smile, Reynold, welcomed the newborn, and proudly said the child had his wife's hair color. The mother, Alice, happily noted the baby had Reynold's eyes. They named the baby Arthur. Arthur, though now in a baby's body, still had the mind of a grown man. He looked around, confused, trying to figure out who these people were, until they both smiled warmly and told him they were his parents. That's when it truly hit him. He had been born again. After a lifetime of war and glory, Arthur now found himself as a tiny baby, unable to do anything for himself. The mother gently patted his back to help him burp, and he did, more by instinct than choice. He didn't understand everything that was happening, but he could tell that Alice and Reynold genuinely cared for him. They believed they were his real parents. Still, Arthur couldn't shake the fear. Being a baby with an adult's mind felt terrifying. When they placed him in the crib, he grabbed Reynold's finger without meaning to. Reynold was thrilled, thinking his son was bonding with him, but Arthur knew it had just been a reflex. He felt even more frustrated when, instead of crying, he suddenly had to go to the bathroom. Again, something completely outside of his control. For someone who had once ruled as a mighty king, being a baby now truly felt like being locked in a prison. As if that wasn't already strange enough, he soon sees something even more unbelievable. While being carried outside in his mother's arms, he watches his father use magic in his hands to smash a rock with a single punch. A piece of the broken rock falls and hits his father on the head. Thankfully, his mother, Alice, quickly heals him with a magic spell. Seeing all of this, baby Arthur realizes that there are powerful abilities in this world that he doesn't fully understand yet, and that idea excites him. His father, Reynold, wears a gauntlet powered by magic and is strong enough to hunt even the most dangerous wild animals in the forest. When Arthur sees his father return from one of these hunts, he begins to think that knowledge is a powerful tool. So even as a baby, he starts paying close attention to everything around him. He notices that many people carry weapons, which suggests that this world can be dangerous. Because of that, people seem to train and grow stronger as early as possible. Arthur doesn't want to be left behind. Later, as Alice gently rocks him to sleep, Arthur reflects on how frustrating these early days have been. Still, he appreciates peaceful moments like this, something he rarely had in his past life, where enemies didn't always play fair. At least now he can sleep without worry. Life continues and Arthur reaches a new milestone. He learns how to crawl. One day, he crawls into his parents' room and sees himself in a mirror for the first time. His parents are overjoyed by every little thing he does. Meanwhile, Arthur is still getting used to being called by his new name, though it doesn't really bother him. At bedtime, Alice kisses him goodnight and places him in his crib. But instead of falling asleep, the curious little boy quietly climbs out like Rapunzel escaping from a tower on a mission. After struggling with his baby body for so long, he's finally getting better at moving around and taking control of his needs. While his mother is busy washing dishes, Arthur sneaks through the kitchen silently, careful not to make a sound. He opens a door and reaches his destination, the bookshelf. Just as he thought, this is where he could find what he was looking for: knowledge about the world he's now living in. One of the books tells him that the continent he's on is called Dikkin. It's divided into 3 main kingdoms: Darv, the underground home of dwarves; Eleanor, the forest land ruled by elves; and Sapin, the human kingdom where Arthur currently lives. Sapin is also the most populated. Like the country Arthur lived in during his past life, Sapin is a monarchy. But here, the throne is passed down by blood, not taken by force. Another book explains that this world is not as advanced as the one he came from, mainly because of magic. In this world, there is a special energy called mana. The ability to use it is usually inherited and only appears in about 1 out of every 100 people. There are 2 main ways to use mana. Augmenters use it to make their bodies stronger, faster, and more durable. Conjurers, on the other hand, can control and shape mana into magical spells. To use mana properly, a person needs to focus all the scattered mana in their body into something called a mana core. This process is what turns someone into a mage, and it usually starts during puberty or a little later. Arthur understood well the importance of becoming aware of the power inside him. To truly control and use it, he needed to focus that energy at the center of his being, his mana. Thankfully, the memories and knowledge from his past life as a king still lingered, and he intended to use them in this new life. During one of his quiet moments, he began meditating. Inside his mind, he entered a calm, empty space, and to his surprise, a small amount of mana began to gather between his tiny hands. Just as he was making progress, his mother Alice found him after searching the entire house. She gently scolded him, asking him not to scare her like that. But then her expression changed as she noticed something odd. Arthur froze, thinking she had caught him using mana, but in reality, she just noticed that he needed a diaper change. This moment reminded Arthur once again that his baby body was like a cage, and he needed to grow stronger to be free. The next day, Alice wrote in her diary, reflecting that it had already been 2 years since Arthur was born. She described him as cute, curious, and well-behaved, but one thing continued to bother her. He had never smiled. Outside, Reynold was teaching Arthur how to handle a stick like a sword. He was impressed with the boy's natural skill and called Alice to come watch. However, Alice wasn't pleased. She didn't like the idea of her little boy playing with anything that looked dangerous. After observing his parents for 2 years, Arthur started to understand the balance of power in the house. Or maybe he thought women rule the world here. Later, the family took a trip to the city. Alice said Arthur always seemed excited when they visited. As they walked through the busy streets, Arthur quietly observed everything. He studied the weapons on display to understand how advanced this society was. He noticed substances that didn't exist in his previous world and was amazed to see magic being used so openly. On the way home, as he napped on his mother's back, Arthur reflected on his life. Despite its limits, this new life wasn't so bad. His parents met all his needs. He wondered if this warm, caring environment was what a family was supposed to feel like, something he had never truly experienced before. Alice, too, had been watching her son closely. She loved how his eyes lit up at the market and how he eagerly reached for books. She thought he might have inherited his adventurous spirit from Reynold. Still, deep down, she hoped he'd live a quiet and peaceful life. At sunrise the next day, Arthur watched his father practicing outside and admired him. Reynold shattered a rock again and proudly asked his son if he was impressed. Alice gently placed her hand on Arthur's shoulder and said the show wasn't that amazing, but things were about to get more exciting. Right then, Reynold threw a punch into the air, creating a powerful gust of wind. With a stomp, he sent a wave of wind through the ground. Arthur was amazed. Reynold was clearly an augmenter, a warrior who used mana to strengthen his body. Watching this made Arthur even more determined to train and get stronger himself. But his mother had other plans. It was nap time. Arthur, however, reached for the bookshelves, signaling he wanted a book. Alice told him no. It was time to sleep. But Arthur used his best innocent look, and it worked. Smiling, she handed him a book, and he began to meditate once more. Over the past 2 years, Arthur had studied a lot. The most valuable lesson he had learned was how to create a mana core, a central point in the body where scattered mana is collected and controlled. It had taken countless hours of focus and effort, but now his work was finally paying off. At last, he managed to gather the final piece of energy, and suddenly, an explosion rocked the house, destroying a large section of it. Outside, Reynold shielded Alice from falling debris, but got hurt in the process. Both parents rushed back inside. Reynold reached Arthur first, and what he saw left him speechless. His 3-year-old son was floating in midair, surrounded by glowing mana, smiling confidently. Arthur knew this moment marked his first true step toward power. But then parts of the ceiling started to collapse toward him. Panic set in. He couldn't die. Not now, not after all his hard work. Alice dived in and grabbed him just in time, while Reynold used all of his strength to push the heavy wood away. Safe in his mother's arms, Arthur looked up at her, realizing just how far his parents would go to protect him. Reynold asked if Arthur was okay, and Alice, with tears in her eyes, said yes. She held him close like he was the most precious thing in the world. Arthur didn't quite understand why she was crying. It reminded him of a duel he once fought in a past life, where the defeated boy was comforted by his parents. He didn't understand that kind of emotion back then, and he still didn't now. but somehow he felt it. And so for the first time in this new life, Arthur began to cry too. He clung tightly to his mother, starting to understand just a little what it meant to be loved. A man is judged for trying to kill the king despite once being a loyal servant. The law was strict, betrayal like his deserved harsh punishment. However, the council showed him mercy. Instead of execution, they allowed him to return home to be judged there. Standing in front of his wife and young son, the man admitted his crime. He begged for punishment to fall on him alone, fearing that if they returned to their homeland, all three would suffer a horrible fate. He pleaded for his family's safety. A counselor, speaking through a strange stone pillar, scolded the man for his reckless act against the respected king. Such troubles, he said, should never bother someone as important as the king. Still, the council chose to punish the entire family. In the end, King Grey killed both the woman and child himself. The counselor called this mercy, saying the king had freed them from a painful future. Strangely, the man thanked the king, much like the emotionless pillars did. In the present, Arthur received a pair of gauntlets from the Arnold. Excited, he gave one to his son. But Arthur preferred his small wooden sword. Reynold, watching his son, picked up a stick and challenged him to a duel. Without hesitation, Arthur attacked with quick, clever moves. Then the man used mana to strengthen his sword. To his surprise, Arthur did the same, breaking the stick in half. Impressed, Reynold rushed to tell his wife, Alice, that their son needed a real teacher. Alice refused. She reminded him that he had promised to train Arthur himself, and that was exactly what he had planned. Still, their son's talent was clear. It couldn't be ignored. Alice finally agreed to teach Arthur magic, but Reynold disagreed. He said Arthur was different from others. After all, he had split mana-infused wood when he was just 4 years old. Alice understood how serious it was, but she didn't want to send their little boy away to a distant city. Reynold urged her to think of his future, but she wanted him to think of the present, how much they would miss watching Arthur grow. Listening to their argument, Arthur interrupted and gave a simple solution. They should all go together. His parents stared at him, amazed. Then, without wasting a moment, they began packing. Arthur smiled, thinking they always had this energy. They just needed a reason to show it. Hours later, they stood before 2 carriages. At his father's request, Arthur introduced himself proudly as Arthur Lewin. Nearby, several warriors arrived at the Arthur's house. One of them knelt and said they had met before, though Arthur might not remember. But Arthur did. They were the Twin Horns, Reynold and Alice's old group. Their leader, Adam Crench, stood beside Angela Rose, who gave Arthur a warm hug. Durden Walker then stepped forward and offered Arthur a hard cracker, while Jasmine Flamesworth sat silently at the top of one carriage. A pointy-eared archer named Helen Shard also introduced herself. Once everything was ready, Reynold gave the order to leave. As they traveled towards Zira City, Arthur looked at the outdated carriage. It wasn't like the flying ships of his past life, but it was still good enough. During a rest stop, they were suddenly attacked by wolves. Jasmine quickly took down several with her daggers. Reynold punched one using his gauntlet. Adam pierced a wolf with his spear, and Helen shot arrows from afar with perfect aim. Meanwhile, Durden used earth magic to shake the ground, and Angela used wind to knock back a wolf. Watching them, Arthur realized how far he still had to go to reach their level. Later, they set up camp and lit fires for dinner. Reynold told Arthur to eat as much as he liked, but the boy wasn't used to eating wild meat. Alice, however, ate too much and ended up feeling sick. She noticed her husband was hurt and got up to heal him. While healing, Arthur discovered that his mom was a special kind of mage, a healing broadcaster, which explained why they lived hidden in the countryside. When she was done, Reynold thanked her. Then Adam surprised them by asking to borrow Arthur for some exercise. Knowing it was more than a game, Arthur agreed. Adam powered up his spear, and Arthur responded with stronger mana and a green boost to his leg that shocked Adam. Though just 4 years old, Arthur moved so fast he appeared behind Adam, but he slipped, losing his balance. They clashed until Adam knocked him into the air with a special move. Luckily, Angela caught him with wind magic. Afterward, Durden and Helen scolded Adam for being too rough, but Adam praised Arthur's bravery, jokingly asking if Reynold had given him some kind of miracle training. Then Jasmine came over to Arthur, eager to learn his speed technique. Her serious gaze was all too familiar to him. By the next day, the trip was going smoothly. During a break, Arthur trained with the adults, proud to share knowledge from his past life. He taught Jasmine some dagger skills and showed his speed with a green aura boost. That night, Arthur read by candlelight, then ate dinner, only to be surprised when Jasmine gifted him a rope-tied dagger. It was his birthday. The other women watched in shock. Jasmine rarely made friends. Adam then called everyone to continue the trip. Arthur noticed his mother looked unwell, though she tried to hide it. As they traveled, the group was ambushed by bandits. arrows flew through the air. Angela used wind magic to block some, but the enemy had numbers on their side. Their leader told his men to spare women and children for their value. Arthur thought sadly that cruelty existed everywhere. The bandits rushed down the hills. Alice held her son tightly, vowing to protect him. Durden cast a huge fireball that exploded on the ravine. Reynold fought off many enemies with skill. Helen shot a bandit to save an ally, and Adam struck down more with his spear. Jasmine darted through the battlefield like a shadow. Arthur knew his team was skilled, but raw talent alone wouldn't win a war. Still filled with rage, Durden killed several to protect Angela, but the attackers kept coming. Arthur realized the true danger, their overwhelming numbers. Reynold fought well, but was eventually thrown into a carriage and injured. He told Alice and Arthur to stay put, saying his wound wasn't bad. But he warned them. If the bandits discovered Alice's rare magic, things would turn worse. He told Arthur to escape with his mother. Then came the shocking news: Alice was pregnant. Arthur now understood why she'd been feeling sick. Accepting his duty, he boosted his speed and ran with her. The bandit leader set men to chase them. Even while hurt, Reynold kept fighting to slow them down. As Arthur and Alice fled, two thieves blocked their way. Jasmine and Adam arrived just in time to defeat them. Helen supported from a distance with her arrows. While running, Arthur thought about the irony. He had once taken lives. Now he was risking his to save them. Maybe this was karma. A bandit mage launched his spell. Arthur threw himself in front of his mom, taking the hit. As he fell off a cliff, he used Jasmine's dagger to drag the mage down with him. Durden and Angela tried to save him with magic. Alice screamed his name. Falling, Arthur felt a strange peace. He now understood what family meant. He was about to become a big brother. It would have been a beautiful thing. Hours later, he woke in a dark forest. As the ground shook, a huge and terrifying creature appeared, calling Arthur by name, as if they had met before. Arthur faces a strange creature. He's scared but tries to stay calm. Confused, he asks what the creature is and why it's there. The creature speaks with a calm voice, saying Arthur still has a lot to learn, but she's actually on his side. The creature picks fruit from a tree and gives it to Arthur, saying he needs to recover. Badly hurt, Arthur is told he's lucky to be alive and must eat if he wants answers. He eats, then asks about his parents. The creature named Sylvia shows him a vision of a battle and says his parents escaped safely. Arthur is overwhelmed and tears up. He doesn't know who to thank until she says her name, Sylvia. Time passes. Arthur starts to heal, but wants to go home. Sylvia says it's not safe yet. They're too close to a dangerous forest. Still, she has a plan. Arthur gets impatient, but Sylvia says opening a portal takes time. As he trains by swinging a stick like a sword, she laughs and says it's good for kids to stay active. Arthur begins to wonder why Sylvia never talks about her past, even though she looks strange. Still, she's kind. One day during meditation, Arthur releases his energy. Sylvia is surprised at how strong his natural mana is. She shows him how to use energy the way she does, gathering and using it at once, something normal people can't do easily. She asks if he'd like that power. Arthur, excited, says yes. When she asks what he'd do with it, he says he'd destroy anyone who hurts the people he loves. Sylvia immediately smacks him on the forehead, sending him tumbling. She tells him that's the wrong answer. Arthur complains it's that kind of thinking that once made him a powerful king, but Sylvia warns him that anger and violence will only poison his heart. After checking that he's okay, she asks him again what he'd do with that power. This time, Arthur says he'll protect the ones he loves. Sylvia smiles and says that's the right answer. Nearby, another beast watches, planning to stop her from escaping. The story jumps to Arthur's past life. He was King Grey, walking through a palace where servants bowed to him. A noble greets him, but Grey knows real power lies with Parliament. His country was falling apart, birth rates were low, and war was all he had. Though praised for his success, he felt more like a weapon than a king. He tells his advisor, Marlin, that he's stepping down. Later, the crown is broken and his sword stands like a gravestone. Back in the present, Arthur trains harder. Sylvia says his power could be limitless. He struggles to control it but pushes on. In a fight, his sword glows with power. Until he's hit and thrown behind some rocks, Sylvia tells him to stay hidden. A new creature suddenly arrives. It looks like Sylvia. She's shocked it found her. The male beast, smelling blood, demands she come with him. When she refuses, he attacks. Though she blocks the magic, it weakens her. Despite the pain, she stands strong. Her body glows, revealing her dragon spirit, and she blasts him with energy. The male beast survives and attacks again, shaking the cave. Sylvia searches for Arthur, but the enemy mocks her concern. Before he can attack again, she freezes time, keeping only her and Arthur moving. She tells Arthur that everything had been part of a plan. Confused, Arthur asks if she's a dragon. She says that's what humans call her kind. She opens a portal saying it's time for him to go, though the exit is farther than she thought. She gives him a feather, an egg, and marks his arm with a symbol. She doesn't explain them, only says he'll understand later. Arthur, heartbroken, begs her to come with him. But Sylvia says she could have second home earlier. She didn't because she loved their time together. He asks if he can save her, but she tells him this was always meant to happen. Her calm words make the goodbye even more painful. Arthur says he doesn't care if she's a dragon. She feels like family. Sylvia gently reminds him he already has a mother, but when he suggests she could be his grandmother, she's moved to tears. She asks him to say it again, and when he does, she cries softly. She pushes him toward the portal. Just before he disappears, he begs her again to come with him, but the magic pulls him away. Alone, Sylvia lets time move again. The enemy spell hits her, and he mocks her. But then he sees her bleeding and worries he might have gone too far. He's wrong, she was pretending. She releases a huge magical blast, lighting up the cave. In her thoughts, she wonders if it was enough. A young voice answers, it was. As Arthur walks through the portal, Sylvia speaks to him in his mind. She reminds him of what she once told him. He agrees. She says he'll be okay. Arthur feels deep sadness, and Sylvia admits the world is full of sorrow, but says it's possible to turn pain into joy. Arthur says he can't do that, but she says he can take his time, and she believes in him. She calls him the strongest king she's ever known. Arthur is shocked. Could Sylvia have known about his past? Then he wakes up, lying just like when they first met. Tears in his eyes, he quietly stands, puts the egg and feather into his bag, and hears a sound nearby. Arthur used his super strength to climb up a tree quickly. He realized the egg he was carrying was too easy to see, so he tucked it safely into his bag. As he jumped from branch to branch, he spotted a group of bandits attacking a carriage. They threw a young elf girl inside, clearly planning to sell her. The scene reminded Arthur of a recent attack he had faced from the same group. His anger flared, and he thought about how Sylvia once refused to train him because of his violent nature. Wanting to stay calm, he decided to quietly follow the carriage as the sun set. At the bandits' camp, Arthur heard one of the men say something disgusting about the girl. He felt the urge to act but stayed hidden, waiting for the right time. He noticed several horned wolves tied up and controlled by magic collars. To cause a distraction, he threw some fruit at one of the wolves. It growled loudly, and a bandit came over and beat it harshly. That was Arthur's chance. He used mana like a blade and attacked, quickly taking down the man and grabbing his weapon. Another bandit came to check, and Arthur defeated him too. Though his body was still that of a child and he was getting tired, he managed to stop the third attacker. The injured man warned the others that Arthur was a mage. A fourth bandit, also a mage, appeared and said that a boy with magic was worth more than the elf girl. He tried to capture Arthur, but Arthur dodged and kicked him. Then Arthur threw a dagger tied to a rope, but the bandit caught it and attacked. Arthur was knocked down, but he burned the man's knee with magic. Enraged, the man changed his mind and decided to kill Arthur instead. Using the man's anger against him, Arthur threw the dagger again, this time hitting him in the head and killing him. The last bandit begged for mercy, but Arthur remembered how the elf girl had begged too, and was ignored, so he didn't hold back. Inside the carriage, Arthur removed the blindfold from the elf girl. For a second, he thought she looked like someone else. He freed her, and when she asked if he was hurt, he showed her a painful wound. She was the first child he met in this world. Arthur then covered the bodies, saying it wasn't something a child should see. But the girl pointed out that Arthur was just a kid too, which left him speechless. She asked about what happened, and he lied, saying there had been an accident and that everything was fine now. He gathered her things, thinking how lucky it was he had arrived in time. She blushed quietly and held his hand, not wanting to be alone. Arthur promised the bad men wouldn't return. She joked that he was crazy to leave a pretty girl like her alone. Arthur thought the forest was safe for elves, but she said her parents had warned her about ghost trees that eat young elves. When he asked where her home was, she pointed the wrong way. She didn't know the exact location. She'd gotten lost chasing bugs. Arthur thought she was a little strange, but he remembered what it was like to be a lonely child and decided not to leave her. They talked about the horned wolves. Arthur wanted to get rid of them, but the elf girl said they were only dangerous because of the collars. She believed they weren't truly bad. Wanting to respect her view, Arthur helped free the animals, who calmly walked away. They kept traveling through the forest. During a break, Arthur asked her name. She said it was Tessia. He introduced himself and offered her some soup, guessing she was hungry. The moment reminded him of how Sylvia once gave him fruit. He realized he was starting to sound like her. Tessia said the soup smelled weird. Arthur explained it was just boiled and salted dried meat, usually better with herbs. He thought about how he always saw food as just something to survive on. She wished for sweets instead. Arthur noticed how young she seemed. She asked why he was in the forest. Arthur said he had lost his family. She said she was lost too. Arthur asked about her homeland, Eleanor. Tessia said it was fun, but her parents were always busy, so her grandfather and helpers looked after her. Their walk dragged on, and they still didn't know how far Eleanor was. At one point, bugs swarmed Tessia. She said it was normal and even used them to mark paths. She put one on Arthur's ear like an earring, and he realized this was how children played, something he never had the chance to do. Tessia excitedly said she trained under her master once her mana awakened. Arthur asked about school, but she didn't understand the idea. Meanwhile, a horned wolf was quietly watching them. That night it howled, and Arthur regretted not dealing with it earlier. He told Tessia to sleep in the tent while he kept watch. Alone, he thought about why Sylvia gave him the egg. Tessia couldn't sleep. She remembered her grandfather's warning about boys, but said she trusted Arthur. When he told her to sleep, she argued that if he stayed outside, other bad people might attack. He misunderstood, asking if she was scared of ghosts. She said no, it just felt safer if he stayed in the tent. Arthur agreed to sleep inside, pretending not to be afraid. Tessia asked him not to leave without telling her and to help her if she needed the bathroom. Later, she guessed Arthur was from the human kingdom. Her grandfather had said human men were womanizers. Arthur asked if she knew what that meant. She wasn't sure, so he explained that it mostly applied to nobles with many wives. She fell asleep while he thought the moment felt like having a little sister. By morning, they packed up and continued. Tessia seemed more cheerful, as if she'd forgotten about the attack. Arthur, though, worried about his family. Suddenly, pain from his mana surged through him. Tessia ran off to find plants to help, but Arthur was too weak to stop her. A horned wolf appeared nearby with a piglet, but didn't attack. Tessia came back with herbs, and Arthur told her to stay away from the wolf. She believed it was showing thanks. That night, they cooked the pig over a fire. Tessia added mushrooms she said were common among elven women for nutrition. Arthur ate them but ended up sick, spending the night in the woods. Later, Tessia told stories elves usually shared before sleep. She always dreamed of visiting the outside world, but was warned not to trust strangers, especially humans. After finishing, she saw Arthur had fallen asleep and gently covered him with a cloth, thinking she was more mature than he was. By dawn, they started walking again. Arthur still felt weak. Tessia, feeling close to him, asked if she could call him Art. He agreed, though his tone was flat. She teased him about sounding old, and he teased her back, calling her a crybaby. Finally, they reached a magical portal. Tessia was excited. She held out her hand to Arthur, and they stepped through. On the other side was the beautiful forest city of Eleanor. Tessia landed gracefully, but Arthur stumbled. Elven guards saw him and rushed over, seizing him, looking serious. Arthur immediately felt regret for trusting Tessia. He blamed himself for letting his guard down around someone who seemed so kind. When the elven officer ordered Arthur's execution, Tessia quickly stepped in, defending him and saying he had saved her. The officer accused Arthur of brainwashing her. But then an older elf appeared from a portal and commanded the guards to stop. Tessia called him her grandfather, Virion, the former king of Eleanor. Virion thanked Arthur and revealed that Tessia was actually a princess. Arthur was shocked. Tessia had never said anything about being royalty. Soon Tessia's parents arrived. They were relieved to see her, but her father, King Alduin, was angry about a human being there. Virion ordered the guards to back down and praised Arthur's bravery. Tessia supported Arthur's story and asked that he be treated kindly and allowed to visit the castle. Even though humans were normally not welcome, she showed him warmth and respect. On the way to the castle, Virion told Arthur he wanted to talk with him. Arthur could feel that Virion had a powerful presence. Tessia held Arthur's hand as she guided him through the elven market built in the giant trees of the Elshire forest. The homes were strange and beautiful, but Arthur could still feel the hatred many elves had for humans because of past wars. Everything felt unfamiliar, including Tessia herself. She had saved him but also stood by silently when the guards attacked. When they arrived at the castle, Tessia's maids greeted her. She told them to treat Arthur well, calling him her savior. Arthur wanted to talk to her in private about what was happening. Soon, her family sat down at a table filled with fancy food. Arthur hesitated, but Tessia urged him to join. Seated at the end of the table, he felt out of place. King Alduin introduced himself and Queen Muriel. Arthur said he was just a poor boy from Sapin and was surprised to be in such a place. The queen complimented how politely he spoke, and Arthur felt he was slowly gaining their respect. When asked about the forest, Arthur explained he had been separated from his family during a bandit attack. He didn't share every detail, but once he mentioned Tessia, the mood shifted. Alduin slammed the table in anger when he heard that slave traders had tried to capture his daughter. He blamed humans, but Arthur argued that cruelty had nothing to do with race. When they asked how he saved the princess, Arthur said he used magic. A soldier doubted him and accused him of lying to sneak into Eleanor. Virion stopped the soldier and told him not to disrespect their guest. Tessia confirmed Arthur's story and recalled how the men planned to sell her because she was an elf. Overwhelmed, she was comforted by her mother. Alduin believed Arthur's story and thanked him. Arthur asked to return to Sapin to find his family. Even though the meeting was peaceful, Alduin was still unsure about helping a human because of the long-standing hatred between their races. Arthur said that true kindness meant treating others fairly, no matter where they came from. His words surprised the king and made Virion admit he had a point. But Alduin explained the portal to Sapin only opens every 7 years, and it would be 5 more years until it opened again. Hosting a human that long was too risky, so he arranged for soldiers to escort Arthur out the next day. Arthur was hopeful about going home, but the pain in his chest kept getting worse. That night, while staying in the elven castle, the pain became too strong while he showered. He called out for Sylvia, hoping for comfort. Looking out from the balcony, he saw Tessia and her smiling parents and wondered if his own, Reynolds and Alice, were safe. He believed they were strong, but doubt crept in. Would they still smile at him after all he had been through? Unable to sleep, Arthur wandered the city and ran into Tessia. She apologized for how her family had treated him, but Arthur wasn't upset. He understood they were just worried. She told him everything would be fine once he found his family, but Arthur wasn't sure. He felt like he had only caused pain since coming to this world. Tessia, seeing his sadness, gently scolded him. She said his parents would be sad to see him like this, and even she already felt sad knowing he would leave. Her words reminded Arthur that he was loved even when he didn't feel it. Suddenly, glowing firefly-like bugs filled the air. In the lights, Arthur saw visions of his parents. It made him wonder what he had truly been fighting for. Though the scene was peaceful, he still remembered how Tessia had looked when the guards attacked him. He felt the darkness inside him. He tried to say sorry, but before he could, a small object flew through the air. Arthur caught it just in time. It was thrown by Virion, who had been watching from a distance. It was a test to check Arthur's reflexes and confirm if his story was true. Arthur asked if he was being tested, and Tessia defended him, saying her grandfather was wrong to judge him like other humans. Virion said he wasn't mocking Arthur. He tossed Arthur a training sword and lifted Tessia into the air for safety. Arthur rushed to attack, but Virion easily dodged with impressive speed. Arthur had to use mana just to keep up, but Virion was always one step ahead. Eventually, Virion broke Arthur's sword with his bare hand. A piece of wood flew toward Tessia, but Arthur blocked it. Then he used magic to charge again. This time, he landed a hit, which surprised Virion. The elf called for his second round. Tessia scolded her grandfather for being too rough, but he said he had to take it seriously or he might get hurt. Arthur joked it was an honor to be taken so seriously. Impressed, Virion offered to train Arthur. Arthur was unsure, until Virion promised to contact his parents to let them know he was safe. But then the pain in Arthur's chest returned. Virion confirmed Arthur's fear. He had a cursed power inside him, a beast will, and if he didn't learn to control it, it would kill him. That marks the end of today's anime recap. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach a current goal of 10K subscribers.